Good afternoon and welcome to all the participants. Sejam todos bem-vindos. Boa tarde, meus senhores e minhas senhoras. Estamos aqui hoje para apresentar esta conferência, que é uma missão para investidores sul-africanos com interesse de investir em Angola. Eu sou a Tatiana dos Santos, sou a responsável para a área de promoção e investimento para o continente africano na Wesgro. Hoje teremos várias apresentações, das quais iremos abordar sobre a visão geral de projetos de investimentos de Angola e incentivos governamentais para estrangeiros, para investidores estrangeiros, enfim. Antes de começarmos esta conferência, gostaria de mencionar algumas regras que são: iremos silenciar todos os microfones para evitar retorno. Todas as perguntas devem ser deixadas na seção de Q&A na barra de ferramentas. Se não tivermos tempo suficiente para responder todas as questões, poderemos fazê-la por e-mail. Temos a opção de escolha de línguas, seja em português ou inglês, de acordo com a apresentação. As apresentações estarão disponíveis após o evento. Sem mais delongas, minhas senhoras e meus senhores, eu tenho a honra de apresentar-vos o Sr. Tim Harris, o PCA da Wesgro. Sejam todos bem-vindos a esta conferência. Obrigado. Tim, over to you.
Obrigado, Tatiana, and thank you very much to you for introducing the session and to all of our guests and presenters who are joining us on this platform. It is amazing to sit here so many months into this global crisis and realize just how efficiently and effectively Angolan business and South African business have adapted to this changing environment to continue doing business in this challenging time. And that's what this Outward Foreign Direct Investment mission is about. We began working as an agency at Wesgro on what we call Outward Foreign Direct Investment about 5 years ago, because we realized the normal mercantilistic objectives of bringing in investment and driving out exports was missing this question around the strategic relationship, particularly between Angola and the Cape. And so we thought one of our objectives needs to be to help South African companies expand their footprint in the rest of Africa, starting with one of our most important trading partners, Angola. Tatiana, can you clarify, are you doing translation? Do you need me to stop or can I continue?
Yes, we are going to, we're getting the translation. There is a link where you can switch the language. Okay.
Right, so it's simultaneous. Thank you for clarifying. Thank you. And certainly this historical relationship between Cape Town and the Western Cape and Angola gives us a very stable base to have this conversation about outward foreign direct investment, about helping more Western Cape companies invest in Angola and create jobs in Angola as they expand from right here in Cape Town and the Western Cape into the broader African continent. And that's what today's session is about. Thank you first and foremost to all of the participants who are going to be joining us at the Wesgro team together with our partners in the city and the province, as well as the broader South African team led by our representatives at the South African Embassy in Angola and our Angolan partners, both in the markets of Angola, in Luanda and the surrounding provinces, but also in the consular team here in Cape Town. And that is the broader team that will be working together to help this expansion effort from Cape Town and the Western Cape into Angola. And you will see from the very senior distinguished representatives we have that you will be very well supported as companies as you embark on this journey. So let me start by welcoming and thanking Her Excellency Dr. Maria Filomena Delgado, the Angolan ambassador in South Africa, as well as His Excellency Dr. Sebastião de Carvalho Neto, the Angolan Consul General here in Cape Town, and Dr. Antonio Henrique da Silva, the chairman of the Angolan Private Investment and Exports Promotion Agency, the national equivalent of Wesgro, working on a very similar mandate, the agency Apex. Also from the South African Embassy in Angola, the team that is assisting companies from South Africa and the Western Cape expand from the South African Embassy side. We have Mr. Meshach Matia, the Economic Counselor, Mr. Freddie Jordan, the Political Counselor, and Mr. Cortino dos Santos, the Marketing Officer. So you can see we have senior representatives from both sides of the delegation, and thank you very much to all of you for joining for this session and the work together over the coming months. But particular thanks to our experts that are joining, Mr. Francois Fauchier, the advisor at Trade Research Advisory, and Mr. John Rocha, the Chief Director at Trade Invest Africa at the DTIC. You'll be hearing more from both of them in a moment. Thank you for joining. And lastly, and not least, thank you to all of the team across the embassies, the consulates, and at the DTIC and at Wesgro, who've helped create this platform that's going to see more investment flow from Cape Town and the Western Cape into the great country of Angola. Thank you very much. Enjoy the session. Back to you, Tatiana.
Thank you very much, Tim. And thank you to all the distinguished participants and guests. You are welcome. I'd like to give the word to Mr. Antonio to say a few words before we hand over the presentation to Cornelius.
Thank you very much, everyone. I'll make my introduction speech in Portuguese, but then I will follow with the presentation in English. Excelentíssima Senhora Embaixadora da República de Angola na África do Sul, Embaixadora Maria Filomena de Fátima Lobão Telo Delgado, Excelentíssimo Senhor Embaixador da República da África do Sul em Angola e Embaixador Opa Ibrahim Monareng, Excelentíssimos senhores representantes e membros da classe empresarial de Angola e da África do Sul, caros participantes, em nome da IPEX e em meu nome pessoal, queiram aceitar as nossas saudações e desejos de um ótimo encontro de negócios entre empresários de Angola e da África do Sul, neste webinar de 3 dias que realizaremos de 1 a 3 de dezembro. Esperamos que os senhores participantes venham a explorar as mais variadas oportunidades existentes nos diversos setores econômicos, principalmente naqueles que constituem as prioridades quer para Angola como para a África do Sul. De facto, auguramos que todos os nichos de negócios e parcerias sejam explorados. Angola e África do Sul gozam de uma relação comercial saudável, podemos mesmo dizer sem medo de errar que a África do Sul é o parceiro comercial mais valioso para Angola em África, pois os números assim o dizem. Entre os maiores investidores africanos presentes em Angola, a África do Sul lidera o ranking. Essa é mais uma razão para que Angola continue a considerar o interesse dos empresários sul-africanos registrado em Angola, aonde como prioridade na agenda das nossas relações comerciais, desde outubro de 2018 a outubro de 2020, o total de investimento sul-africano registrado ronda mais de 670 milhões de dólares, sendo o maior investidor africano em Angola, tendo como os principais setores produtos com origem no petróleo, o agronegócio, a indústria, o turismo, comércio e pesca. As exportações de Angola para a África do Sul, no período de 2019 a 2020, de acordo com os registros da AGT, rondam os 421.732.031 dólares, dos quais apenas cerca de 15.827.000 foram de produtos não petrolíferos, o que indica que ainda existem imensos produtos e serviços de origem angolana por exportar, não ligados ao petróleo. Esperamos, assim, que mais angolanos explorem também as oportunidades de fazer negócios existentes na África do Sul. O mercado sul-africano é dos mais abertos em África. As oportunidades são imensas. Angola tem uma economia ainda dependente de um único setor que a dinamiza e suporta o orçamento geral do Estado em mais de 90%. Aqui referindo-se ao setor petrolífero. O nosso país tem uma missão árdua e urgente de diversificar a sua economia. Dos grandes desafios que nos colocam à frente, realçamos aqui o aumento da produção agrícola e agropecuária, acompanhando da criação de uma cadeia produtiva capaz de aproveitar e explorar ao máximo as cadeias de valores em cada produto exportável. Por exemplo, o foco nos setores estratégicos já descritos no Plano de Desenvolvimento Nacional 2018-2022, PDN, e no PRODESE, inscrevendo-se como potenciais setores de oportunidades para o investimento privado, tais como as indústrias de origem na agricultura e pecuária, as indústrias com origem nas pescas, as indústrias com origem nos subprodutos do lixo, indústrias de bens de consumo não duráveis, indústrias criativas e indústrias com origem nos minérios do petróleo e também dos seus derivados. Outros dos grandes desafios estão ligados à padronização dos nossos métodos de produção e dos produtos aos níveis internacionais, através da implementação de processos industriais e de conservação internacionalmente aprovados. Isto representa um leque de oportunidades de investimentos ligados ao setor tecnológico industrial, logística, transportes, formação profissional e científica. Convidamos os empresários sul-africanos a investir em Angola e aproveitar as iniciativas e esforços do governo de Angola para a criação de um melhor ambiente de negócios no país, através da criação e aprovação de mecanismos legais de incentivo estrangeiro. A IPEX tem agora uma nova ferramenta útil na facilitação e aceleração da implementação das iniciativas de investimento, a janela única do investidor. O objetivo é reduzir a burocracia e melhorar a articulação institucional, removendo os obstáculos ao investimento. Para terminar, desejo a todos os participantes muito sucesso e que, como resultado dos dias de interação, possamos testemunhar o alavancar de negócios entre Angola e África do Sul. Muito obrigado.
Muito obrigado, Sr. Antônio da Silva.
Thank you very much, Mr. Henrique da Silva.
Gostaríamos agora de dar a palavra ao Cornelius, que vai fazer a apresentação sobre o overview, a relação entre a África do Sul e Angola.
Now we're going to proceed for the presentation of the relationship existing between South Africa and Angola.
Cornelius, over to you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much, Tatiana, for the introduction and for the opportunity to tell the story of
Boa
the
tarde
good
a todos. Muito
relations
obrigado
that we
à senhora Tatiana pela
have
apresentação.
in South Africa with Angola. We look forward to tell you a little bit more about the story of the Western Cape and how things are developing at the moment. So first of all, let's just have a quick look at the size of the various economies. Nigeria, of course, Africa's largest economy, followed by South Africa. Angola in the 6th position. And if the Western Cape had been an independent economy, it would have been the 18th largest economy. So the output that we have as a province is more than the output of autonomous countries such as Zambia and Senegal. And therefore, South Africa in general, but the Western Cape in particular, presents a very attractive market for trade, investment, tourism, and film. So all the areas that Wesgro is mandated to promote. If we look at the average growth of the province, you will see that our average growth is nearly 3 percentage points higher than the national average, and that we are very much in line with the largest province, which is Gauteng. At the same time, unemployment in our province is by far the lowest, both at the narrow definition and at the expanded definition. And this tells the story that our province is capable of creating jobs for the people of our that live here. And this is on the back of the trade, investment, film, and tourism opportunities that is presented in our region. The Western Cape is, of course, very well connected to the rest of the continent and the world. We have 3 international harbors at Saldanha, the city of Cape Town, as well as in Mossel Bay. Our airport, the Cape Town Airport, has been voted the best airport in Africa for 4 years running, as well as the airport with the best staff on the African continent. We have 4 international universities serving approximately 120,000 students, of which approximately 10% are from the rest of the African continent. Unfortunately, only 380 of those students come from Angola, and therefore I believe that there's a big case to present our country, our province, as a destination for education for students from Angola. The Western Cape economy is very much a services-based economy. In 2005, the services economy accounted for less than 75% of all GDP output, while that grew to nearly 80% by 2018. And at the same time, you'll see that sectors such as manufacturing accounting for 15%, agriculture in the raw form accounting for approximately 5%. Of course, these industries are hugely important in terms of job creation, and therefore the sectors within agriculture, wholesale, resale, and trade carry a proportionately large segment of employment in our province. For many years, companies have headquartered themselves here in Cape Town and the Western Cape, and we think in particular of the big retailers like Pick n Pay, Clicks, and ShopRite, and agribusiness companies, some of whom has been around for nearly 100 years, and our asset managers, all the big asset management companies very much headquartering themselves in our province. What is really good to see is that industries that didn't even exist 30 years ago are now deciding to headquarter themselves here, and specifically around energy and sustainable energy, technology, and in particular business process outsourcing. In fact, in the business process outsourcing, we were able to create a large number of new jobs, even while the entire economy was in hard lockdown. And as a responsible government, we are also focusing on sectors that can create jobs quickly and that help to facilitate the type of investment that will grow our economy in the form of oil and gas, agriculture, and tourism. And in these sectors, we have the strongest relationships with our counterparts in Angola. So the Western Cape government very much focusing on the sectors of growth between South Africa and Angola. If we look at our export destination markets, Namibia is our largest partner, followed by the UK, and then third place, the USA. Of course, a large portion of the product that is destined for Namibia is in fact destined for Angola via road transport. And what is really heartening for us to see is that 5 of our top 10 export markets are into the rest of the continent, showing the strong relations that we have as a province to the rest of the African continent. And the rest of the continent has been our largest trading partner for the last 5 years running. We've seen significant growth in those relationships, and it's not just in the export of oil and gas, but it's also in the export of other products, both agricultural and manufactured goods. If we look at the Western Cape export basket, you will see that, or an import basket, let's start with that. The vast majority of what we import is in the form of crude oil and refined oil. The rest of the products is a combination of food such as rice, medicines, clothing, and there's also some alcohol products in there. From an export perspective, refined petroleum makes up the largest part of what we export. And then 7 of the top 10 export products are on the agricultural side, including citrus, wine, apples, grapes, fruits, berries, fruits and nuts, and fish. In 6th position, we have flat steel, and in 7th positions, we've got engine parts, underscoring the importance of manufacturing and the capabilities that we have as a province to export manufactured goods into the rest of into the continent, but also the rest of the world. Of course, the Western Cape is very much an agricultural powerhouse. If the Western Cape had been an independent economy, it would have been the 5th largest exporter of agricultural and agri-processed goods. The Western Cape is responsible for 66% of all beverage exports from South Africa, 49% of all agricultural outputs, and by a large part, all fishing products, in fact, 86% coming from our province. We export roughly 1 million bottles of wine per day, making us the 8th largest producer in the world. And the total trade between between the Western Cape and the rest of Africa, accounting to more than 47 billion in 2018. If we look at the trade relationship between the Western Cape and Angola, you will see that we have a strong trade deficit, meaning that Angola export a significantly larger volume of goods to South Africa, and particularly our province, than what the province export to Angola. But if we look at the actual products being exported, you'll see that it is highly in favor of one product from Angola, namely crude petroleum oils, making up 99.88% of all product. And therefore, there's a big business case for the diversification of product from Angola to South Africa. If we look at the products being exported from South Africa into Angola, the largest product being tobacco, which is at $10 million, significantly less than the $446 million that is being exported from Angola into South Africa. The second product is onions, shallots, garlics, and leeks, followed by dishwashing machines, packaging materials, wine, refined petroleum oils, ethanol, alcohol, refrigerators, and furnitures. So the basket from our province to your country is a mix of agricultural and manufactured goods. And from your country to our province, it is predominantly petroleum related, followed by a significant amount of agricultural product, as well as some industrial product. Now, this is what the air access to Cape Town looked like in 2014 when we launched an initiative to bring more direct flights to our city. We believe very strongly that connectivity is central to the ability for business people to do business, to facilitate investment, to facilitate trade, to bring tourists to our country, and to enable different people to link up and meet and discuss opportunities. Over the 5-year period that the program has been active, we have been able to double the number of flights to our city. And Of course, with the current position in Corona, we've seen a significant decrease in the number of airplanes flying into our city, but we believe very strongly that this is just a matter of time until things will normalize again. And we are working very hard to ensure that all of these flights resume and that we even increase the number of flights to make sure that we are the most connected city on our continent. If we look at where our tourists are coming from, the vast majority of our tourists still come from Europe, the UK in first position. In second position, we have the USA. In third position, Germany. And in fourth position, we have Namibia. And even though we have a direct flight to Angola, unfortunately, we don't have Angola as one of our top 10 tourism destinations as a source market. And therefore, I believe that we all have a very big responsibility to promote our two destinations for visits in person so that we can change the numbers, because tourists become traders and traders become investors. And if we invest in each other's countries, we will facilitate the economic growth and job creation that is required to make Africa a prosperous destination. In order to facilitate that investment into the Western Cape, Wesgro is running the Invest One Stop Shop, which is a partnership with the DTI and 14 other segments of government, including the Department of Labor, the tax collector, the Western Cape government, the City of Cape Town, and a variety of other players. And this is a space in which investors can come to help resolve all of their issues with red tape, all of their licensing challenges, and enable them to make easy, fast, prosperous investments into our city and into our province. I thank you very much for your time and appreciate the opportunity to present the Western Cape and Cape Town.
Thank you very much, Cornelius, for the lovely presentation and for highlighting the opportunities that the Western Cape has to offer to the Angolan businesses. Just to summarize, I'll summarize quickly in Portuguese what Cornelius' presentation is, just to accommodate our fellow Angolan businesses. O resumo da apresentação do Sr. Cornelius foi sobre identificar as oportunidades que a cidade do Cabo tem para oferecer para os nossos parceiros ou empresários angolanos no setor da agricultura e outros setores como também de turismo. Temos já a TAG, que é a área, que é o voo direito de Cape Town para Angola, para Luanda, que possa nos facilitar que as nossas relações bilaterais sejam mais próximas uma à outra e para que possamos trabalhar junto mais no processo de diversificação dos produtos ou de áreas, nos vários setores que o nosso governo tem apresentado para vários investidores em volta do mundo. Muito obrigado. Eu agora vou passar a palavra para o senhor François, que vai apresentar sobre as facilidades de fazer negócio entre Angola e África do Sul. So now I'd like to introduce Mr. François, who's going to talk about the ease of doing business in Angola, who's going to do a good presentation. Francis, over to you.
Thank you, Tatiana. I've shared my screen. I'm on display mode, so you should be able to see it. Tatiana, can you just confirm, is it all good? Can I go?
Yes, you can go.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Tatiana, thank you for the opportunity. I'm delighted to be here this morning with our fellow Angolans. I'm going to get straight into it. I think before I start, perhaps just a reminder is that your mind is like a parachute. It is most valuable when in fact it is open. So what I'm going to share with you this afternoon are some facts about the ease of doing business both in Angola and in South Africa. And I'm going to come to a conclusion that I think will benefit both countries in terms of bilateral trade. First and foremost, in terms of the global pandemic, There's no doubt that coordinated responses are required at this stage of the race. This is the worst crisis since the Great Depression that we saw almost 100 years ago. And it will take significant innovation on the policy front at both the national and the international levels for the economies, especially the ones in the developing world like Angola and South Africa, to recover from this intense recession that we find ourselves in. Perhaps just a few pointers with regards to the pandemic's impact on the economies and what it actually means for decision making. This is the largest shock to the global economy since the Second World War, even for countries with very little COVID-19 infections. And the countries that prevent additional economic infection will be the ones that will be best off in future. Crisis management, the challenge, however, thereof is compounded by large gaps in knowledge and information. And we can distinguish among three. The first one is that there are many things we know that we don't know. And that's sort of okay, at least we are aware of that. Unfortunately, there are also many things we don't know that we don't know. So we're not aware of those things, which is a little bit worse. And then the worst thing is that there are many things we know that are simply just wrong. And all these three levels of uncertainty affect how we make decisions. So there's overwhelming uncertainty in the process of decision making. But having said that, we do have some empirical evidence regarding the conditions of doing business on a bilateral basis between South Africa and Angola. And I'm going to spend a number of slides in order to highlight some of those to you this afternoon. So how do we measure the ease of doing business? There's a very good benchmark study that is being done by the World Bank for a number of years. They do it every year. It's called the Ease of Doing Business Study. And what they do in the study for most countries around the world, there are 11 different categories or pillars that they actually measure. It starts with dealing with construction permits. It deals with the full life cycle of a business, from origination and establishment to, in fact, running operations and actually winding down. So the first one is dealing with construction permits. Then it's a matter of getting electricity, registering a property. A business has to get credit in many instances, i.e. accessing finance. There are shareholders involved. So if they are minority ones, what does the law say in terms of protecting them? Dealing with day-to-day operations, for instance, importing and exporting, trading across borders is a crucial one, and one that we're going to spend some time on this afternoon. We also have to pay taxes, have to enforce legal contracts, operating in a secure business environment is part of the daily operations. Let's say things do go wrong and you have to wind things up. How do you resolve insolvencies? And then if you have to start from afresh, how do you actually start a business? So I'm going to spend a little bit of time looking at the rankings between Angola and South Africa for these various pillars. But before we do that, let's just look at why does the ease of business actually matter? If we look at some research that was shared by the World Bank in terms of the cost of starting a business, we can see that in low and middle income economies, the cost of starting a business as a percentage of income per capita in those countries have continued to decline. But we can also see that the high income countries have significantly lower costs of actually starting a business. No wonder there are more business being that can go around in those countries, because it's significantly cheaper on a relative basis to start a new business in most of the developed world. Another one to look at, which is very insightful, because we continuously get asked, so Francois, how do we create a more entrepreneurial environment? We don't have to reinvent the wheel when we want to create an entrepreneurial environment. We see that there's a strong relationship between the ease of doing business score, i.e. the easier it is to do business, the more or the higher the level of entrepreneurship that actually exists in the country. So we can conclude to say that the ease of doing business is associated with higher levels of entrepreneurship. If an enabling environment is created for business, well, then more business actually takes place. And that's exactly what we want from a sustainable economic growth point of view. Here's one example of, for instance, the number of procedures and the time in order to obtain construction permits. And this was done by the World Bank, and this is for China. And what we see over here on the left-hand scale and on the right-hand scale for two different variables over a period of about 14 years is that China has made substantial improvements to the process of obtaining a construction permit in that country. When we make it easier for business to be conducted in countries, in certain jurisdictions, in certain areas, in certain countries, the result of that is that more business is in fact conducted. And that's exactly what we want. We want more economic growth. So we should allow and create an enabling environment so that more business can in fact take place. If we look at the outlook for the domestic economy in South Africa, we find that over the last, well, since the outbreak of the pandemic, South Africa has been downgraded to junk status from a sovereign credit ratings point of view. We've had the COVID-19 crisis. We were in recession prior to the crisis. So it looks like it's all downhill from here. Because of this characteristic of the South African economy, we are arguing this afternoon that the focus should be beyond our borders for growth. And there I am referring to an export-led recovery, not only for South Africa, but also for countries, for instance, like Angola. Let's first focus on Angola's ease of doing business and what some of those rankings actually came out by the latest study by the World Bank. If you look at Angola's ease of doing business rankings, according to the latest data. Now, before I show you the data, just remember these are rankings. So the closer to 1 we are, the better the ranking. The closer to 100 or 200 we are, the worse the ranking. So we find that this is the rankings for Angola that was done late last year by the World Bank. We find that paying taxes is very easy in Angola. But we also find that getting credit is very hard in Angola. If we were to compare the Angolan operating business environment with other countries around the world. We are, however, this afternoon interested in trading across borders. And we can see from the ranking here for Angola that Angola doesn't rank particularly high in terms of the time that it takes and the costs that is involved in order for products to cross borders. If we look what has happened over time with Angola's ease of doing business rankings, we find that it deteriorated from the period 2010 to about 2016, but recently it has improved. So the rankings have been improving. I must just note here that the level of performance here is fairly low, but it seems to be moving in the right direction. And you'll see in a couple of slides why this is significant. If we then look at the same type of rankings, but for the South African environment, we'll find that, again, we're looking at rankings. So first is good and closer to 200 is not so good. This is what the rankings look like for South Africa, according to the latest World Bank research. South Africa is doing quite well in terms of protecting minority investors. But unfortunately, from a trading across borders point of view, South Africa is not doing so well. You'll remember that Angola was ranked here, I think, 172nd. But South Africa is actually ranked 145th. So we are interested this afternoon in trading across borders, the time and the cost that it takes in order to conduct business like that for products crossing borders. If you look at South Africa's ease of doing business rankings over a period of time, you'll find that South Africa has been slipping in its rankings over the last 10 years or so. We used to be ranked 35th, but we've slipped to about 84th during the latest research. So going in the wrong direction. South Africa's export basket, however, if we look at the composition of that to get a better idea of what we actually trade and more importantly, what we trade with Angola as a country. This is what South Africa exported to Angola in the year 2018. You'll see on the left-hand side, it's dominated by yellow. Those are actually agricultural products. So there's a large variety and diversity of export products that are going from South Africa to Angola. The purple is all chemicals based, a large variety of that as well, and the blue, and then some metals and minerals as well as some motor vehicles for transporting goods. You can see from this picture that it's a fairly diverse and well-constituted basket of goods that are being exported from South Africa to Angola. What did South Africa export to Angola over a period of time, over the last 25 years or so? We see that our exports have been dominated by agriculture. There are also some machinery, there's some vehicles in there, there's some chemicals in there, and there are some metals in there. But the overall dominant part of our trade with Angola, at least the goods that have been going from us to them, has been agriculture. You'll also see that there was a peak that we've reached in terms of our exports to Angola, and exports have actually declined quite substantially over the last few years. If we have to compare this with where did South Africa export to between or over the last 25 years, we see that South Africa exports mostly to China. We do trade a lot with Africa, and we hope to trade more under the CFTA with Africa, but Asia actually dominates in terms of their geographic location where our exports are heading. If we then focus on Angola's export basket to see what that composition looked like and how that has changed over time, we find that if we have to draw a picture of what did Angolan exports to South Africa look like in 2018, in line with what Cornelis has mentioned, this was completely dominated by crude petroleum. The other components in the basket is negligible. So what did South Africa, or rather what did Angola export or import to the rest of the world? The top exports from Angola to the rest of the world in 2018 was dominated by crude petroleum. There's some diamonds in there as well, some refined petroleum products, but the crude version of oil is dominating that picture. The top 3 export destinations in terms of countries, the bulk of the goods are going to China from Angola, then India, and a little bit to the USA. What does Angola actually import? Looks like this picture is sending us a message that there is some refinement capacity in Angola, but there's not enough refinement capacity because refined petroleum is one of the largest importers. Special purpose ships, I believe this is in fact to move crude around, and then a little bit of chicken or poultry, meat and gas turbines, and a little bit of rice. Where are those coming from? Again, it's dominated by China, Portugal, of course, given the language and the heritage with Portugal, and then also a little bit coming from Belgium. Where did Angola export to over the last 25 years? You can see very similar to the South African picture, trade is dominated not by Africa, but actually by Asia. There's a fair amount of trade still going to Europe and North America, but the picture is very much dominated by Asia. Quite volatile in terms of the overall quantum of exports, but dominated by Asia as a trading partner. What did Angola then export to South Africa over the last 25 years? Well, it's a very one-sided picture. Very little prior to 2003, according to the statistics, but since 2003, it's been crude petroleum and mostly crude petroleum. Some dominant peaks and valleys over there, and then a decline over the last few years. The ease of business, however, is what we are interested in, and trading across borders is something that I've shared so far that we've identified that if we want to unlock more bilateral trade is something that both countries will have to pay attention to in order to make it faster and cheaper for goods to cross borders. We certainly hope that under the Continental Free Trade area and all the negotiations that are taking place and that will continue to take place over the next few years, that one of the obstacles for trading across borders will be removed soon among many African states so that we can have more intra-Africa trade and regional development taking place. So what needs to change in order for us to grow? Everybody wants growth, but nobody wants to change. This is a cartoon that I like to use for the simple reason it's very simple and it's very effective. Sometimes we don't see that there are better ways of doing certain things at the sovereign level and at the business level within many industries. And sometimes we are too busy to look at opportunities to actually improve the way we do things. One of the first things I think that the pandemic has showed us is that there's forced digital change, and those that can adopt to the digital change that's been brought on by the pandemic will certainly do better than the ones that reject the digital transformation. Here's a cartoon where they sit around the boardroom table saying that digital transformation is years away. I don't see our company having to change anytime soon, and then the COVID-19 wrecking ball is outside and waiting to demolish them if that is the attitude towards a change. From the South African side, I think there's great opportunity at the moment, not only necessarily only to Angola, but to Africa and to many other developing worlds, but in particularly to the US and China as export destinations. And the reason we say that is that if we look at the dollar-rand exchange rate over the last 5 years, then we suspect that our currency will be weaker for a longer period of time. One of the large contributing factors there is the paradigm shift that we think the currency will undergo due to our international credit rating downgrade we had in March, just as the pandemic started, but also due to the ongoing downgrades that we've received from many international rating agencies over the last 2 weeks. We have seen some strength in the dollar-rand exchange rate over the last few weeks, but I want to just caution here that this is not due to an improved economic fundamentals in South Africa. This is rather due to increased US political certainty after the US presidential elections concluded, and also due to some vaccine buoyancy that have been supporting emerging market currencies around the world. So we've certainly seen a risk-on scenario regarding emerging market currencies from international fund managers. So there's more funds, especially from hedge fund managers and portfolio managers, flowing into emerging market currencies that have contributed to strengthen the currency. And also supportive commodity prices, especially with regards to platinum and gold in South Africa's instance. I want to highlight some opportunities for exporters from both Angola and South Africa, not only for increased bilateral trade between the two countries, but also from international geopolitical developments that we've seen taken place over the last 3 to 4 years, because they do represent new trade opportunities for exporters in Angola and also for exporters in South Africa. And the first one is, well, given the trade war that has been going on between the US and China, there are new global export opportunities. And why am I saying this? I'm saying this because if you look at the tariff lines, the increase in tariffs between the US and China, which has been done on a bilateral level, the average tariff rate there for more than 6,500 line items is close to 20%. So if you're an exporter from South Africa or Angola and you're targeting the US market or the Chinese market, if you're targeting the US market, all of a sudden you'll be able to compete on tariffs. If you're going into the US market from Africa, then AGOA is also in your favor, where more than 6,000 line items, tariff line items, are exempt from import duties going from most African countries into the US market. Why is it significant that this is the war between the US and China? Because they remain the two largest economies in the world. So when the two big elephants fight, there are some crumbs falling on the floor, and nimble and agile exporters from both South Africa and Angola can participate in these new opportunities. It's not every day that an opportunity like this, a global opportunity, presents itself. And I think we need to be very cognizant of what has happened internationally between these two superpowers and capitalize on those opportunities. If we have to look at who is in fact winning the US-China trade war, then the interesting answer to that question is that it's actually not the US, it's not China that's winning the trade war, it's actually Vietnam that is winning the trade war. Why is this? It's because of trade diversion that has been taking place. When those bilateral tariffs have been going up between the US and China, all of a sudden many Chinese exporters are sitting there and saying, but if we just take our goods, which used to say that it was made in China, and we ship it to Vietnam and we repackage it and we put a new label on it, then we can go and export it from Vietnam into the US market. There's been a lot of value chains, global value chains, that have diverted trade in order to capitalize on this opportunity. But now we have to ask ourselves the question that why are South African and Angolan exporters struggling to compete and to capitalize on this global opportunities that have actually presented itself, i.e. some trade diversion? Granted, Vietnam is a neighboring country to China, but why has South African and Angolan exporters not exported or participated in these new global opportunity? And in order to understand, or in order to answer that question, I think we need to understand what South Africa's export basket looked like today versus 15 years ago, to see whether it has increased its diversity and its levels of sophistication or not. And we need to do the same type of analysis on the Angolan side to determine, why this is the case. If we look at the South African export basket in 2018, we'll see that it's a reasonably diverse basket. You can see on the left-hand side, on the vertical there in purple on my screen, the quantum of services exports compared to the quantum of good exports. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that exports out of South Africa is dominated by exports of products as opposed to export of services. Export of services, of course, offer a lot of opportunity for growth in the future around the world, especially from the developing world. It's not nearly as matured as what we've seen in terms of exports in goods in many countries in the world. So this is what the basket looked like in 2018. But what did the basket look like in 2003, let's say 15 years ago versus today? If we look at the South African example, we'll find that South Africa has had added new products to its export baskets. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Over the last 15 years, South Africa has managed to add only 9 new products to its export basket. Why is this significant? It's significant because the value, quantum of those new products to the export basket over the last 15 years is the equivalent of less than 1% of what our basket was worth recently in 2018. So not a very high level of increased diversity has taken place in South Africa's export basket. If we have to distill this down to sort of the implications, we can say that the binding constraint to growth in South Africa has been that economic growth is driven, we believe, by diversification into new products that are incrementally more complex. South Africa added, however, only 9 new products since 2003 to its export basket. If we have to convert those new additional products to the export basket back into per capita income equivalent for the country, then we find that it has only added to about $5 of income per capita over the last, in 2018, which leaves a lot to be desired. So South Africa is diversified into too few products to contribute to income growth. If we do the same analysis for Angola, I'm going to go a little bit quicker. We look at Angola's export basket in 2018, dominated by crude oil. We look at how many new products have been added by Angola over the same period. We find that only 2 new products have been added. The same is true that the value of those new products is less than 1% of the latest value of the basket of exports out of Angola. So very little additional diversity has been offered by both countries. The story is the same. Angola, however, is slightly different. It's only added 2 new products since 2003, and that is the equivalent of about $7 per income per capita in 2018. So a similar story to Angola than to South Africa, is diversified into too few products to contribute to income growth. Another thing that is making imports and trade in Angola fairly challenging is a lack of FX availability, especially during periods of low oil prices. And this is compounded by the fact that the FX pool in the country, which needs to be tapped into to pay for certain imports, is largely a function of the number and the quantum and the diversity of the exports, which is actually bringing the FX into the market. So what we've seen, for instance, in 2015, back then with the collapse of the oil price, that all of a sudden it became very difficult to pay for imports, and that the central bank there had to do a daily allocation to the commercial banks to say, you can get some allocation, you can get some allocation, and that affects imports, and it affects imports to a very, very detrimental extent. So very briefly to conclude, I want to share with you, I've used a number of resources in order to compile these slides, but I want to share with you one very useful free online tool that you can use if you want to look for new export opportunities around the world. And very briefly, just in 3 slides, the one that we can certainly recommend that we use on a daily basis is the so-called Global Trade Help Desk. You can go to globaltradehelpdesk.org. I must be honest, I haven't checked whether they do translation into Portuguese, but if they don't do, then I'm sure if you do it in your browser in Google Chrome, then Google will offer that translation. This is a wonderful website. It's free. It is the business equivalent website of all the international trade centers, the ITC's sort of academic research tools. The reason we like this one is because it's business friendly. You don't need to be a researcher from a university, for instance, in order to run this one. This one is incredibly user-friendly and easy to use, and I can highly recommend it as a potential exporter or importer, regardless of which country you find yourselves in. Another one that I want to mention, because we are in Africa, and is agoa.info that you can go to. That is maintained the content by Trilock down in Stellenbosch, which do a sterling job of this. You can go to agoa.info and you'll find a wealth of information if you want to know whether your product, if you want to export from Angola into the US market, enjoys AGOA status, i.e. no import duties from Angola into the US. Just a reminder that AGOA is the African Growth and Opportunities Act. It is not a trade agreement, it's actually US legislation. It was reviewed a number of years ago. It is valid until 2025. So I want to encourage you to go to that resource and look up whether you can benefit if you want to export to the largest economy in the world. Just very briefly to conclude, if you go to Global Trade Help Desk, I've done one example here, and you want to start exploring what potential opportunities exist if you are in Angola and you want to export to South Africa, for instance. I've just picked a product here to say which product are you exporting. Well, if this is the 6-digit HS code for waters, which includes natural and artificial minerals, so in essence bottled water, you want to go to South Africa, you click on the go button over there. It will take you to a very short and brief analysis of what that opportunity actually looks like for you as an exporter from Angola into South Africa. It will quickly provide you with a market overview, the so-called bird's eye view of opportunities, conditions, and partners in your selected market and beyond. It will give you a summary of how attractive the South African market is as a global importer of your product. It will give you the picture, total imports for that selected HS code, the rank in global imports of that product into South Africa, the global growth from all suppliers into the country, if we carry on. And then if you go to the next piece in the menu that it provides is get to know the South Africa's import tariffs. It provides an overview and some detail here if there are any import tariffs on that selected product that you want to export from Angola into South Africa. In this instance, there are no duties on bottled mineral water, for instance. And does your product meet certain mandatory requirements? If there are notified regulatory changes for a product that have been put to book, then you will find a summary of that in here. And again, that is at globaltradehelpdesk.org. And the last one is, it will give you an indication of what is the time and the cost to export and your domestic procedures. So typically it is estimated that for that product, the time to export from Angola into South Africa would be about 260 hours. It's a significant period of time. And the cost to export about $1,065 US. And then you can go even further into more detail. And for some products, there's a business directory. For many products, there are trade finance providers that you can click and look up, and if you need trade finance. There are also trade promotion organizations that are listed on there, and then also some intellectual property offices. So I want to stop there, Tatiana. Yeah, I think I'm within my time. And if you have any questions or would like some assistance in terms of trade analysis or opportunity identification, those are my contact details, Tatiana, and we've been helping Wesgro for a number of years. More than welcome, to have a conversation after the webinar today. So, Tatiana, thank you very much. With that, I'm going to stop my screen sharing and hand over back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Francis. It's a lot of lesson that we all need to take from there. It's a lot of information, useful information, and thank you very much for sharing all the links where we can literally go and get free information for all our businesses in case we want to know about the different opportunities that we as importers and exporters can benefit from. I'm going to just briefly hand over to Inácio to quickly just summarize in Portuguese what Francois has said, if he's ready. Inacio, are you online?
Yes, I'm here, Tatiana.
Do you want to give a brief summary of the presentation?
Yeah, I can try. Francois was quite extensive in terms of knowledge, but let me go for it, though we see a couple of participants. Ok, saudações a todos. Gostava de passar um resumo daquilo que o Sr. François acabou de fazer a sua apresentação. Ele iniciou com uma citação que dizia que a nossa mente é comparado a um paraquedas que, obviamente, tem o seu maior valor quando temos ela aberto. Obviamente, a nossa mente aberta tem maior valor quando ela está aberta. E durante a apresentação, Tatiana, consegues me ouvir? Alô?
Sim, consigo. Pode falar.
Ok. E durante a sua apresentação, aqui alguns indicativos em termos de gráficos que eu gostava aqui de deixar uma chega ou um resumo, basicamente, em que a sua apresentação cingiu-se num diagnóstico, não é, de crescimento, que foi em colaboração com a Universidade, a Escola para Negócios da Universidade do Northwest, aqui na República da África do Sul. Em termos de indicativo gráficos, eu gostava de fazer chegar, em termos de resumo, há aqui um ranking disponível em que, digamos, Angola, como país, existem vários indicativos. Para fazer um negócio, começar um negócio, o país Angola está em 146, não é? Essa é a posição. Esse ranking foi feito pela Growth Diagnostic, é a organização que fez esse levantamento com a fonte do Banco Mundial, referência ao ano 2020, em termos de obtenção para permito de construção, estamos no ranking 120, obtenção de eletricidade, o ranking 156, fazer o registro de uma propriedade, o ranking indica que estamos na posição 167, obtenção de um crédito, estamos na posição 185, para a proteção de menores investidores, pequenos investidores, a posição que aqui consta é na posição 147, pagamento de impostos ou de taxas, estamos na posição 106, trading across border. Para poder fazer comércio para além fronteiras, Angola está na posição 174, o reforço de contratos, posição 186, e na resolução de insolvências estamos na posição 168. A outra referência que eu gostava aqui de fazer chegar, o Sr. Francel também na sua apresentação apresentou aqui o mapa que indica a exportação que a África do Sul realizou para Angola, precisamente no ano 2018. O mapa está bem descrito e um dos maiores produtos que obviamente foram importados, segundo aqui o mapa, indica uma série de produtos como propriamente carvão, alumínio, produtos de primeira necessidade, aqui bem descrito, isso referente ao ano 2018. Dentre 1995 a 2018, o que a África do Sul exportou para Angola, desde produtos agrícolas, metais, químicos, veículos, maquinarias e também materiais eletrónicos, a ordem em termos de valor vão até $1 bilhão, nesse caso, do período de 1995 a 2018. Em comparação, a África do Sul teve maior engajamento de exportação para outras partes do mundo, com relação à África, teve menor exportação para a posição africana. Com relação ao que Angola exportou para a África do Sul no ano 2018, indica aqui o mapa que cerca de 95,56% baseou-se no crude, não é? O petróleo e os seus derivados. O outro ponto que eu gostava aqui também enfatizar, com base na apresentação, fez menção o Sr. François com relação as vantagens ou os ganhos que os países estão a ter com esse braço de ferro ou essa luta econômica existente entre os Estados Unidos da América e a China, quem têm sido os maiores beneficiários dessa situação, desta guerra econômica que está a acontecer entre estes dois grandes países. E, por último, gostava aqui de realçar que o Sr. François partilhou uma plataforma, que é um website, que chama-se Trade, ou Global Trade Help Desk, onde, via este website, podemos encontrar ou fazer o levantamento de vários aspectos virados ao país. Por exemplo, com relação a Angola, este website tem dados estatísticos, não é, a serem fornecidos para quem puder saber mais com relação à situação econômica do país Angola, em termos de dados estatísticos, em termos de importação, em que ranking para a importação global em que está o país, quantos tem sido o revenue ou os dividendos. Então, esta plataforma está aí, disponível para quem puder aceder, para ter mais informações com relação ao estado atual, em particular Angola. E, por sinal, em final, o Sr. François está aberto para mais questões. Depois desse webinar, estaria disponível para qualquer intervenção mais próxima com relação ao que ele acabou de apresentar. Em suma, procurei tocar nos pontos que achei serem fulcrais ou principais, com base na apresentação que o Sr. François acabou de fazer. Muito obrigado.
Thank you, Inácio, for the brief summary of
Muito
presentation.
obrigado.
It is definitely a lot of take home for it. One of them, which I really want to mention, is the fact that technology has played a big role due to the cause of the pandemic. We all, as you can see now, more technological advanced, where now we can all do all our missions virtually, and having to do this now, it's something that really helps all the economies within the world to grow faster and to be able to interact with each other without having to spend much as well. And also the other lessons that I would take is the exports of services. It's a major sector that each country should actually really focus on, because it's a main sector that will make an economy operate quite fast due to the skills transfers and everything that goes around it. We at Wesgro has taken that opportunity of starting promoting more of our services into the rest of the continent. And Angola, of course, will always continue to be our key countries for the Western as well. So without any further delay, I would like to introduce Mr. John Roches, who is going to give us a brief introduction or a presentation between Angola and its strategic bilateral relationship as well. So Mr. Roches, over to you.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Tatiana. Good afternoon to everybody. Excellency, the Ambassador of Angola to South Africa, and also I noticed the honor.
John, you're very soft. We can barely hear you.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Tatiana, for inviting me to make this short presentation outlining South Africa's trade and investment approach towards Angola. Let me also acknowledge the presence of the High Excellency, the Ambassador of Angola to South Africa, and also the Consul General of Angola to South Africa. I also saw some of my colleagues from our embassy in Angola. In particular, I would like to recognize Mr. Meshach Mathieu, our economic counselor in Angola as well, and other colleagues from our embassy. We thank you, and colleagues from Wesgro, thank you for extending an invitation to us. I've been asked to share a few words about South Africa's trade and investment approach towards Angola, and I gladly do so. My presentation will touch a little bit on these items. I'll just give you a very short introduction. I'll also then share with you some bilateral economic agreements that we have signed between Angola and South Africa since 1994. I will shed some light on our approach towards Angola, how we see this partnership unfolding. And then I'll proceed to highlight some of the opportunities that I think exist for us to strengthen bilateral economic relations between our two countries. And number 5, I'll talk a little bit about how can both Angola and South Africa in partnership leverage the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, but also the SADC Free Trade Agreement in order to advance diversification and industrialization and ensure integration of our two economies into the rest of the region, but also into the continent and globally. And then what should we do to frame a new deal, particularly anchoring on regional value chain. Since 1994, ladies and gentlemen, we have signed a plethora of agreements between our two countries, starting in 1998 with the General Agreement on Cooperation in Economic, Scientific, Technical, and Cultural fields. And the last agreement that we signed was the agreement establishing the Binational Commission. And this was on the occasion of the first state visit by His Excellency President João Lourenço to South Africa in 2017. So with regards to the Department of Trade in the area of trade and industry, we have signed an MOU on industrial cooperation, which identifies all the areas of cooperation between our two countries. And we have also signed a MOU on trade cooperation, which outlines the specific trade issues. And I think one other interesting sort of agreement or commitment we signed was a declaration of intent on the utilization of financial facilities. We then have agreements also in petroleum field, in agriculture, in tourism, and also housing, geology, and mining, in the energy, electricity field. So it's quite a comprehensive set of agreements that we already signed. And I think one of the challenges that we now face is how do we work together to ensure that we begin to implement all of these agreements. I mean, to make it tangible so that we can see projects being implemented. Our approach towards trade and investment with Angola is not different from any other country. Angola is the second largest economy in Southern Africa, in SADC. It's also amongst the top 10 in Africa, so it's a very important and strategic partner to South Africa. And we have a very strong interest to take our bilateral economic relations to another level. And our approach is to focus on 3 key pillars. The first one, industrialization. If we want to grow our economies, both Angola and South Africa need to further diversify our economies. There are areas where we both have competitive advantages. We are eager and would like to work more closely with Angola to identify those specific areas, and I'll shed some light on some of them where we can begin to work together. And I believe because Western Cape is also leading quite strongly in that effort, it's an area that we can all work together with the companies located in the province and elsewhere in South Africa to identify specific opportunities in the manufacturing field, in producing goods and services that we can then trade amongst ourselves. The second area is infrastructure development as an enabler for industrialization and for us to boost our productive capacity. And infrastructure from rail to road to energy to water supply to housing and other types of social infrastructure in the healthcare, in education. These are areas where South Africa has got strong competence, and we are very eager to identify specific opportunities to work together and develop and ensure that we can attract more and more investment into infrastructure in both countries. And I think by doing so, we'll then be able to promote the bilateral and inter-Africa trade that everybody has been talking about. And the third area, obviously, how do we work together to ensure that we establish a mutually beneficial relationship of bilateral trade, but also how do our two countries work together to ensure that we take advantage and leverage the opportunities that the AfCFTA has opened up. In terms of opportunities, the sectors that we have identified is in agriculture and agro-processing. Angola has got fertile lands, has got very good climatic conditions, And South Africa has got the know-how, has the technology, has the experience, and to a certain extent in many areas also has the markets that can provide the necessary offtake of certain of Angolan agricultural goods. I was happy to read that ShopRite Checkers was already looking at importing some bananas from Angola to South Africa, and we believe these types of relationships need to be expanded to include many other goods as well. The oil and gas sector, both midstream and downstream, is an area also where South Africa has significant competence, and Angola being an oil-producing country with the LNG plant that Angola has, we are aware that Angola had plans to sort of develop the downstream industry in terms of fertilizers, in terms of methanol, in terms of ammonia and urea. So we are eager. We have got companies that have expertise in these areas, and we certainly would like to have a conversation around that. The third is energy from generation, particularly renewable energy, solar and wind, transmission and also distribution. We have got manufacturing capacity to produce goods and services into those, but also we have got the capability to actually build, construct, operate and manage some of these facilities as well. I just want to go back a little bit with regards to agriculture, if you don't mind. And I think one of the areas where we really are eager, and we have got companies lined up that are willing to work with Angola, is in operationalizing and making that huge, massive fresh produce market in Angola, Claude Luanda, to make it operational and effective. We have got companies lined up because we know if that facility can become functional and efficient and effective, it's going to pull along with it the entire agricultural supply chain. And we have got companies that are very interested in that. So we would like to have a conversation in that. The fourth area is mining. South Africa, as you know, has got a very good track record in mining, including in manufacturing capital goods and services, and also investing in mining projects around in the country, but also around the continent. And we know that Angola has prioritized mining as an area of interest to diversify the economy away from oil. So that's one other sector. And the last one is hospitality and tourism, where we know the potential that Angola has. And we believe that if we can put together our companies to identify a portfolio of projects that we can begin to work together and implement over the short, medium, and long term, it's going to transform our two economies. How do we leverage the AfCFTA and what will be the economic and distributional effect of such a partnership? We have also been speaking about the AfCFTA. We are very happy and comforted that Angola has ratified the agreement. So it's now 38 countries in total have ratified the agreement, notwithstanding COVID-19. The member states have continued to negotiate. More than 80% of the tariff book has been agreed upon. And I think by now, it must have advanced much more closer to 90. On the 1st of January, the starting of trade is supposed to commence. And the impact of the implementation of this agreement is going to contribute to economic growth in both countries, reduce poverty, and broaden economic exclusion. In terms of income, this agreement will generate in the order of about $450 billion by 2033. So it's going to be a 7% gain while adding $76 billion to the income of the rest of the world. So whatever we're doing here is going to transform the world as well. It's going to increase Africa exports by $560 billion, mostly manufactured goods. It's going to spur larger wage gains for women by 10.5%. And considering that both Angola and South Africa have a large population of women, working together in this area is going to be of tremendous interest and benefit to both of us, and also boosting wage of both skilled and unskilled workers, so creating jobs. Now, the real impact and value of the AfCFTA for us, Angola and South Africa, lies not just in the removal of the tariff barriers. I think one area where we need to work much more closely together is the removal of non-tariff barriers between our two countries so that we can see more goods flowing from Angola to South Africa and also from South Africa to Angola. And here we are talking, for example, when we talk about agricultural products, How do we ensure that we all comply with sanitary and phytosanitary standards? How do we ensure that we align our certification and metrology? Because we come from different backgrounds, historical and colonial. Sometimes the standards, the specifications that we utilize are not aligned, are not harmonized. And if we are talking about the need to increase inter-Africa trade, clearly we need to work together to ensure that we are aligned. And then the second aspect that we really need to work together again is how do we leverage the AFCFTA or the SADC FTA to develop a trade facilitation agreement where we together now agree on the substantive interventions that we both need to undertake to ease the cost of doing business, but also to ease the cost of trade between our two countries. And here we are talking about mutually beneficial trade on the basis of reciprocity. Angola exports to South Africa and South Africa does the same. And together we can then be able to access the vast market. I was just thinking ahead of this as I was listening to the conversation. Between Angola and South Africa, we have a population of about almost 90 million citizens, so together. That represents almost 27, let's say almost 30% of SADC's population, so which is quite significant because South Africa in negotiating with Angola also pulls and brings with it other members of SACU, which are our negotiating partners. So it will enable Angolan companies to be able to access a bigger market rather than just focusing on the 30 million or so population of Angola. And I think that's one area where we want to cooperate. Now, the areas that we need to focus on to facilitate greater levels of trade amongst our two countries, obviously reduction in tariffs. And it is said when one starts looking at numbers is that sometimes it is cheaper for us to export goods or do business with Europe than it is to do business amongst ourselves. And if we are talking about diversifying our economies, if we are talking about increasing inter-Africa trade, we need to reduce tariffs, that one. But also we need to ensure that we remove non-tariff barriers. And when we're talking about non-tariff barriers, we're talking about standards, we're talking about phytosanitary, sanitary issues, we're also talking about competition. And we're talking about some of the levies that are introduced as countries begin to remove tariff barriers. So we need to have a very concrete conversation around it. And I'm sure that once we are able to iron out all of these issues, we are going to see the volume of trade bilaterally and also intra-Africa increase, with both our countries benefiting significantly. We need to work together to increase income tax in our countries. And the way to do it is, if we industrialize, it simply means more companies are coming into operations, more companies are earning increased levels of revenue, paying more taxes to their employees, and those employees by themselves also pay more income to government. So, and we have to work together with Angola. I think there are a number of agreements that have already been signed at that level as well with SARS that we can leverage. The third area, increasing our productive capacity. Both Angola and South Africa still import significant number of value of goods from other parts of the world. And we think that we can substitute those with made in Angola, made in South Africa goods. And that's going to bolster our economies. That's going to bolster our commitment to create jobs and reduce poverty. And if we can work together to increase production capacity in two countries, we are then going to be able not only to supply one another with goods and services, but we are also going to be able to supply to the rest of the African continent. So increasing manufacturing. And the point that we want to make here is growing the pie. We need to grow the pie. We need to increase the size of the opportunity. And when one looks at data that is available, Angola is an oil producing country. In 2014, just to give you an example, based on AfriExim data, Angola imported almost, not Angola, the whole of Africa, $100 billion worth of petroleum products. We spent about $21 billion importing fruits and vegetables, and we spent about $5 billion importing fish. With all the rivers that Angola has, all the oceans that both countries and South Africa also, the coastal lines that we have access to, that should not be the situation. How do we work together to improve our fisheries industry? The Western Cape is very, very good at that. And I think those are the types of partnerships that we need to start talking about. In the oil and gas industry, the Western Cape has very strong presence of companies providing services and goods in that space. Again, an area for us to strengthen cooperation. And these are the specific types of measures that we are going to be able to capitalize on in order to take our economic cooperation to the next level. The specific areas that we have identified to frame a new deal between Angola and South Africa, we believe that in order to leverage the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, we need to look at value chains. Angola has adopted PRODESI, which has identified a range of products that it wants to stimulate local production. Many of them are in the agricultural space, but also in mining and other sectors. South Africa, with the new incoming government from June 2019, adopted what we call the Reimagine Industrialization Strategy, of which the department I am a part of is responsible for. And we believe that these two programs, PRODESI and the Reimagine Industrialization Strategy of South Africa, in a way, have some elements that are complementary, that are aligned, some synergies that exist. And this can create a basis for us to start looking at how can we work together to put in place a comprehensive agreement on economic cooperation, trade, and investment. We need that so that we can take all the different individual agreements that we have between the different departments, identify specific opportunities and projects that would be beneficial to the two countries, and come up with an action plan that we can implement over the course of the next year or 5 years. And I think what we need here is consistency. For too long, we have focused on individual projects. So we take one project, one company does here. But I think if we want to really make impact and transform our economies, it is extremely important that we come up with a program, short, medium, and long term. A comprehensive agreement where the opportunities are identified, where we put in place a team, both government and private sector, that can work together to develop those projects that need to be taken from feasibility through to bankable stage where investment can be attracted and implementation can proceed, but that we can also identify low-hanging fruits, which are projects that are already in place, maybe brownfield, but they just need a little bit of capital and injection of expertise and management capability to be able to take them over the line. And we are interested to talk to that. Now, what are the value chains that we base, and this is based on the SADC industrialization roadmap and strategy, which has also been validated by the World Bank, and this have been developed on the basis of substantial studies that have been done. So agricultural value chain that South African cluster, South Africa and Angola can work on. Number one, soya. We import significant amounts of soy cake from Argentina and Brazil, where South Africa has a deficit of 1.5 million tons. We have sufficient capacity here to sort of process soya into different products, and particularly into animal feed. Angola has got fantastic climatic conditions to produce soya. How do we begin to build a value chain between Angola and South Africa, but then along the time also bring on board other countries in the region that also have similar capability? Sugar is one area very sensitive, but Angola has put up a sugar plant producing also ethanol. South Africa has great capabilities and experience in that field. How do we work together? Meat products, so we're talking poultry and beef, cassava. Currently, we're importing about 15,000 tons of cassava starch, in particular for industrial purposes. Angola is one of the largest cassava producers in Africa, and that's an area we have a few companies here that have shown some interest. That's an area where we can work together to try and add value to cassava within Angola, and also then be able to export some of that starch to South Africa as well. Other foods and drinks, so Angola and South Africa, you're talking about maize, seafood, oil seeds. We're also talking about rice. We are importing rice in significant volumes and numbers as well. These are all areas that we can look at. Fish, I already spoke. Horticulture, so fruits, vegetables, and flowers. And also wildlife. One of the great big selling points that Angola has is the giant black sable and sable. And That animal is almost running extinct. We have got a plethora of South African companies and experts that are willing to help Angola to maintain that fantastic trophy, to use that to attract more tourism into Angola, but also to ensure the survival of the breed. And that's one area. And then forestry and timber as well. So that's in the agricultural space. In terms of minerals and beneficiations of those minerals, energy minerals, so we're talking about oil and gas. Angola has an LNG plant. South Africa has huge petrochemical expertise. So that's one, to produce polymers as well. We're willing to share some experience there. Iron and steel is another area where South Africa is competent, has capabilities. With respect to iron and steel, a quick study across Africa shows that we are importing right about 38 million tons of steel every year. With all the infrastructure projects that are being implemented in rail, in ports, in housing, and also urbanization, huge buildings that we are beginning to see, in energy, all these projects use steel, yet we are spending more money importing steel while our industries within the continent are dying or dormant. So we need to work. We are aware of some of the iron ore and steel projects that Angola has. We would like to work very closely to see which one of those can we work together to ensure implementation. I spoke about fertilizer. One of the fantastic opportunities is Angola has all the three elements to produce fertilizer: nitrogen, potassium, and potassium. So these are the three all in the north, significant reserves. And that can be utilized to increase as agricultural production is increased within the continent. Then the supply of NPK also becomes critical. And South Africa is experiencing that area. Diamonds. Angola, Botswana, DRC, Namibia, and South Africa are the largest producers of diamonds in the world. Yet we do not have one diamond mine in the region. We have to go to Tel Aviv, we have to go to Mumbai, we have to go to Dubai. We have to go to Antwerp. What about we start looking at how do we begin to develop a diamond cluster in our region so that we can attract those tourists, those buyers that normally go to other places of the world. They need to come here. We can add value to our diamonds here. We can start producing jewelry. And I think there are capabilities and experiences between the two countries that can provide an impetus for us to move to that level. So that's really what some of the value chains that we have identified. In the manufacturing space, consumer goods is very, very important. So leather goods and footwear as well. We have been looking around the continent what amounts of money Africa is spending to importing clothing and textiles from other parts of the world. We are aware of the plans that Angola has in the process of privatizing. How do we work together to ensure that we start wearing what we produce within the continent? The demand is there. The climatic condition to produce the raw materials are also there. What we need is to really work as a team consistently to take us to another level. By way of an example, this is what we think we can do in terms of agriculture. Here, from an input side, Angola wants to develop its agricultural sector. What South Africa brings to the table in the input side, equipment, we do manufacturing, seeds production, we do crop protection, we are also there. Fertilizer, we are also there, while Angola builds its capacity to be able to start producing fertilizer internally. And then we have the financial services and lenders that can provide crop insurance and all the other instruments that are needed for commercial agriculture to become viable. So there we can complement what Angola wants to achieve. In the primary production sector, we have farm management and operational expertise, investors, farmers that are willing to come, and also technical experts to give the extension services and put in place outgrower schemes for small-scale farmers to integrate Angola subsistence farmers into commercial farming operations so that they can have access to market. But also, how do we then link those with the different market activity? And here we are talking about post-harvest handling, in terms of on-farm transport and logistics, off-farm DC transport and logistics. That's why I spoke about Claude in Luanda. We know that there are several that have been set up in many of the provinces. Some of them are operational, others are not. How do we work together to make those viable? Because that's what is needed in order for farms to start producing. That's the channel to take goods to market. And then obviously in the processing space where there can be products processed within Angola for animal consumption, and others for human consumption, and others for other products. Because I like to say, when we talk about cassava, we only know about funge, but funge is not the only byproduct from cassava. There are many others. How do we begin to expand and develop those types of value chains? The same applies to soya, the same applies to maize. And in South Africa, we have some of that expertise that we can ensure that we have marriage. And I think lastly, the example that ShopRite is giving, where it's operating in Angola, but it's also looking to buy bananas to bring to its shop here in South Africa. We are aware that when we are off season, we bring bananas sometimes from Ecuador or other countries in South America as well. With the ASF, the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement being put in place, it's important that we start looking at what we need to do to trade with one another. And with these words, Tatiana, I thank you. I remain available. My contacts are there. Our colleagues at the embassy are also available to talk to you. Meshach has been there almost now for a year, and we are really, really very eager. I just want to conclude by saying the following. If between our two countries, we put in place a team, and even if we start with one province, put in place a team, we know that Gauteng is also very interested. Put in a team of officials that can really look at the programs from both sides of the fence and identify specific opportunities that we can work together, and that we determine what is needed to be done. Those projects that are ready for implementation, how do we go about it? We put them aside and we create a process to develop them further. And those projects that still need feasibility study money, need a little bit of work to be taken to the next level. We also put them in one pot, and then we have those two channels and say, over this next period of time, 1 to 3 years or 5 years, this is the work that we are going to do to ensure that we can take this project to the next level. And I think if we do so, we are going to see results. We are going to see that the agreements that we have signed, that have created a platform for us to engage one another, are going to become a reality on the ground, where we see projects being implemented, roads being built, and agricultural projects and farms being brought on stream, and factories also being managed and operated. We thank you very much for the invitation. We remain at your disposal for any further contact. Thank you very much.
John, thank you very much. It's a very informative presentation. I'm sure all of the participants will go away with a pack of information that is available for you. And I couldn't agree with you more, John. Collaboration and working together is the way to go for us and to grow the continent as well as our economy, if you want to have a better Africa for all of us. There's definitely a room for us to take this to the next level, as you said, which is collaborating. Hence, we have a huge collaboration between Wesgro, the DTI, the IPEX, as well as the South African Embassy in Angola, to make sure that we are here to support all investors from both sides, be it Angola or be it South Africa, to make sure that we collaborate together to grow our economy, create more jobs, and so forth. There is a lot of rooms for investment in all the sectors, and you have highlighted very well the key projects and how can our South African companies can best go invest in there. Without any further ado, and before I hand over to Mr. Antonio to present the different opportunities that that APEX would have to unpack for us, I just want to quickly ask, is there anyone who has a question for either John or Cornelius before we hand over to Mr. Antonio? Please post your question, your Q&A on the chat box, and we will be responding to them. If we don't have enough time to respond, as I've said before, we will then email you all your responses via email. Without any further ado, and time is not on our side, I'm going to hand over to Mr. Antonio, who is the CEO of IPEX, to unfold all the opportunities that they have in the pipeline. Over to you, Mr. Antonio.
Thank you very much again. It's a great pleasure and honor for us to be part of this event. And of course, after the comprehensive and insightful presentations that were made by my predecessors from Cornelius, Francois, and John, it's not definitely going to be an easy task to go again through all the details that they have already shown. So what I will do, in fact, is going to drive it through the challenges that we had as a country in terms of the reforms that are ongoing, because Angola, it's a country that currently promotes on different areas reforms that are intended to bring forward changes to both our friendly, let's say, to a more friendly environment for investors to come, but also to again be able to promote initiatives according to the programs of diversification of the economy that the government has in place. By having said so, we need to look a preset of conditions that need to be in place to secure that the reforms that are going to be that are ongoing actually do bring forward results as the expectations that we have. So in that regards, we have now APEX as the entity that represents the government in regards to the private investment and exports. And as part of our mandate and mission, we are in charge of the implementation of the government policy. We have objectives to improve the business environment, and as core business, we promote and attract private investment. We are also in charge of the promotion of exports. And in order to do that, we need to be able to evaluate projects, to go through the legal process, and also to be in charge of the institutional cooperation. APEX also, as an important element of its activities, we set it up a single window, the investor gateway, which enables us to give access to the investor to the Angolan market and to facilitate all the process of implementations of their projects in the country by making available and accessible a key tool, which is SETIP, which is an IT platform. And based on that IT platform, we have 6 main points to address, where we highlight the fact that it's possible to submit an investment proposal from anywhere in the globe 24/7, fill out the application, and every single stage of that is done online. And at the end, it's also possible to track the ongoing phases and how, if any assistance is needed on the way, so that we end up being effective and also in response to the more and more high standard demands that the investors rightfully put on our shoulders. Secondly, it's also important here to mention that as part of our challenges, we had to review the legal framework of the investment. So in 2018, a new investment law was passed, and that investment law, new investment law, had to cover 6 important pillars. So the first pillar was the no more limitation on the minimum investment amount. We have defined priority sectors, development zones, investment regimes, investor rights, and it was also important to secure the jurisdictional guarantees. As part of that, we comparing with the previous law, we have on this slide the main changes that were meant to to be introduced so that, as I said at the beginning, the Angolan space for investment could be considered a much more attractive one. So in the formal law, we had a minimum of investment, and we also had the obligation to have a local partner. Under the new law, there's not such a need anymore, so there's no obligation on that side of the local partner. And then the country, because of the extension, Angola is quite a big country. We had to divide the country into 4 regions so that asymmetries were tackled and promotion of sustainable growth and wealth across the country is secured. From the dividend side, when under the previous law, all the amounts could be with no regulation transferred. Now we managed to through the central bank and through other mechanisms to make possible that investors, according to international standards and best practices, are indeed able to repatriate the dividends, but it's well done without it's done in an organized fashion, controlled one, in the sense to avoid not recommendable situations in the process. I was just mentioning the country, how the country was divided in 4 zones, zones A, B, C, D, and as the zones move into the interior side of the country, the incentives tend to be higher. So Luanda, the Luanda zone is the province of Luanda is the one that benefits less. But as you move forward, let's say either north or south or east or west, you get to a point where, let's say, to a province that's closer to South Africa, like Kwandu Kubangu, where it's a province with huge agricultural potential, where in terms of size, we are talking about a land size about the size of France. So it's a big space with water resources and also with arable land. Just to put in perspective, Angola has 35 million hectares of arable land. So it's a huge space for agriculture development, and it's not the only potential that we have. Of course, in order to be able to promote an attractive environment, we also thought that we should look at the investment regimes to put in place. So we have 3 investment regimes. The one is the pre-declaration one, the second one is the special regime, and we have the third one is the contractual regime. Each of them have specific requirements and advantages. Since I will be sharing the presentation with you later on, I will just emphasize the last one, is which we are now studying, since it's the one that's going to be able for big structural projects to put together a space for negotiation on a one-to-one basis between the investors and the Angolan government on specific incentives to be taken in account. Also, it's also important here, and I will refer to what was already mentioned by Francois and also by John. It's regarding the doing business and the opportunity that we have to look at the Angolan and South African market in the context of a wider perspective, which the African agreement brings us. So it was already mentioned based on the different KPIs that must be taken in account when it comes to ease of doing business, how Angola stands, how South Africa stands. But I would like to put here an emphasis to the results of the reforms that we are ongoing, and even if they still represent, in terms of impact on the scale, not a very high impact, but we can see on the positive growth of that curve that we are doing and significantly growing. And that has been noticed by the Mu Ibrahim organization, that in a space of 10 10 years and looking at the overall situation of the continent, Angola was amongst the 8 countries that positioned third that had improved in all different areas. And it's due to the reforms that the government is putting in place. And of course, that we are going to be on that track for years to come, and especially to the ones that are related to tackling of corruption and the reduction of bureaucracy within the government. Looking at the Angolan market opportunities, we see here the different sectors. I will not go into detail because my predecessors have really done a good job in being not only specific in their approach, but they also brought numbers, and those numbers are internationally shared by organizations that do follow on this subject. So I'm just going to highlight the sectors like the agriculture and forestry, geology and mining, industry, fishery and services, and the products that we can see on this slide that are available to be produced or either export or locally or export into markets like the South Africa or elsewhere in the world. An important other point, we will here have a look at the trade balance. It was also mentioned already that Angola and on the side of Angola, we have basically more products related to the oil industry. So the balance shows us that Angola is majority exporting to South Africa still derivatives of oil. But on the South African side, we see medical equipment, we see machinery, we see also articles of steel. So there's plenty of room to increase that trade relation. And for that to happen, we need to easy all the obstacles that we find that are existing and need to be sorted out. This is also a slide that shows the Angola export to South Africa. Again, we can also see here how are the Angolan imports from South Africa, and the majority of the products, and as you see across the years, those products have been exchanging in terms of their nature. But we believe that from here on, with the next year reinforcement also of the Free African Trade Agreement, that we are going to be, because of the proximity of our markets, common interest and advantages on each side, that we have plenty of room to make our trade relation and the development of joint projects, either in Angola, based in Angola, or with the intent to address the other markets in the vicinity, join forces and be able to do that. So when it comes to brands that are South African brands that have presence in Angola, you see these ones are the main ones that are currently in the country, which show, because of their size in South Africa, and also because of the significance that they play in Angola as companies that have well established, that have been increasing their presence and the variety of sectors that are covering, that it's a good sign that we have good examples of success stories that should become an incentive to other companies to come and to experience the presence in the Angolan market with the opportunities that they have, both locally and also to look at the next market, the vicinity of the countries that we are part of. In terms of Apex activities, you can also see on this slide what has come as a result from 2 years ago when we changed the law. So when a new investment law was brought into place, and based on that same investment law, the results are here. So we noticed a swift from the origins of the investors. Basically, prior to that, we had either from the Western hemisphere or from the US or Asia. Now we see more and more even African countries that investors that were already in the country, and they are now diversifying their own activities from trade to manufacturing, either agriculture. So we think that on the next years and the following, we believe that the diversification of our economy through the programs that the government has in place, Prodesi, the 54 products that are part of that, will enable us to bring to have more and more presence of South African companies in the sectors that were already mentioned, especially the one that I believe has a lot of room to be explored, the agriculture one. Having said that, and summarizing my presentation, I look forward to the answer to any questions that might raise, and to continuously collaborate with Wesgro and any South African companies and entrepreneurs that are willing to come into our country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Antonio, and thank you for all the information. We are definitely going to work together a lot more after this webinar, as there is a lot of companies that are interested to understand more of the other opportunities that IPEX has to offer as well to them. I actually have one question in mind for you, which basically is, as investors, how does one go about removing the dividends out of Angola with the current situation?
Well, that's a very good question, because going back 2-3 years ago, that was the main challenge, and that was one of the main concerns from an investor's perspective. And of course, anyone that wants to invest worries about how to pull out his funds from the country. So through new regulation and through the harmonization of the financial system under the leadership of the National Bank as the main body to tackle that kind of situation, we managed to not only improve the procedures, but also to, in between those 3 years, to see the results. It's important to look at the results, because those are the ones that will drive other investors to follow the steps. So the problem is sorted out. There is in some conditions, or in some at certain level, because of the shortage of forex availability, since we are a very oil dependent economy still, and there are some here and there some time related concerns, but in terms of a specific project, a specific entitlement to repatriate dividends as part of the project in implementation, and which is part of a private sector under the private investment law, we can firmly say that we don't have those challenges anymore.
Okay, no, thank you. Thank you for that. I'm sure all the investors and companies were interested to hear that part. I know in your presentation, you've mentioned that there is a lot of potentials in the provinces as well. How does one go about getting process to go invest in the provinces, since the Luanda is where everybody wants to be, but the opportunity is really on the provinces, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. And the opportunities are in the provinces, and not only the opportunities are in the provinces, some of the advantages are in the provinces, because let's say if you want to do a big scale agriculture, that's where you need an extensive space in terms of availability of land, water resources. So mainly those provinces have that kind of setup, and it's a great opportunity to see interest from farmers that have the expertise, that have the technology, and have the know-how to look at Angola as, I will say, the ideal space, because the conditions are ideal. Of course, in some cases, you might need an extra mile in terms of what needs to be done to complete. But also I see that extra mile as an opportunity for someone else in a different sector to invest. When we are saying that, let's say in some occasions you might need an additional capacity in terms of availability of electricity. So there is an opportunity for investment in electrical energy. So let's say, or if there is a need to put floor mills, or to get into roads or railways. So there's a variety of sectors that can complement a specific investment. We're not saying that an investor will be starting from scratch, because the government has also made a lot of investment in infrastructure. So we have either in some spaces the optimum, and in others there's still room to improve. But in general, the conditions are there to a good start. And when looking at the next year with the enforcement of the African free trade, I see it personally, and we as an agency, we see it as a great opportunity for all of us to, instead of, let's say, to look at our internal market size of 30 million population, but altogether, if we look at the SADC region, we are 394. So we should take advantage of that, and also take the advantage of lowering logistic costs, because Angola is northern situated compared to South Africa, or even compared to the region where Wesgro is based. So coming to Angola and exporting to Congo, or being closer to even the other countries, will definitely represent a great opportunity for everyone. It will bring value to investors. It will generate employment in Angola, and as a private investor, it will also improve the availability of forex in the country.
As investors, what incentives do I get to come invest in Angola?
Well, the incentives, there's by law, the incentives, as I mentioned in the beginning, the country is divided in four zones, and the investment, the incentives, they grow as you move away from the coastal side of the country. So as you move into the interior, you are entitled to have more incentives, because we thought that to attract investors into the country, and I will share again the slide that shows that. I hope it's visible. I don't know if you can see it well.
Yes.
So as I was mentioning, if you look where Luanda covers, let's say most of the consumers are based in Luanda. Luanda, it's 9 million population. So is out of the 30 million of Angolans, is 30% of the market. But as you move either north to Cabinda, which is D, or as you move east, you can see that in those provinces, the incentives can be the higher ones. And I will share with you the details of the incentives, so that you can see how they increase, and on exactly what specific elements or specific incentive, either is it through the duties, or through when you were importing raw material, or when you are also bringing into country products that you're going to re-export. So there's plenty of ways to take advantage of the current incentives policies.
Great, thank you very much. Wow, what a mouthful presentation, and I'm sure I had some of the questions for the investors. I'm going to open the floor to questions. So if you have any question to any of the speakers, please unmute yourself and just ask the question.
aberta agora a sessão para questões. Aquele que tenha uma questão a colocar a um dos palestrantes que acabamos de ouvir a apresentação, tenha bondade para sim tomar palavra e colocar qualquer questões que seja com relação à temática. Tempo cedido aos presentes. Obrigado.
Okay, I guess the presentation was so mouthful that no one has any questions. But if we do have questions later on, we will pass on to each speakers depending on who the questions is addressed to. And on that note, I would like to literally say thank you very much to all the participants. A big thank you to our guests, the Angolan General Consul in Cape Town, our Excellence Ambassador, Mrs. Maria Filomena Delgado, and to our speakers, thank you very much for such informative presentations and availing yourself to be part of this webinar. And to all the participants, thank you for lending us your ears and to be part of it. I want to just reiterate that this is not the end, it's the beginning of a very long relationship that we're starting to build between the Angolan Consulate, IPEX, South African Embassy in Angola, who is here to all support all of you to make sure that you tap into the different opportunities that Angola has to offer for you. So thank you all. Tomorrow we'll have another information session where we're going to have the Angolan privatization unit who's going to talk about the key projects on various sectors that is available for any investor or anyone that wants to partner with. It will take place at 10 o'clock South African time, and it will be 9 o'clock Angolan time. If you do want to participate, I'm going to post my email address on the chat. Please send me an email and I'll send you the program otherwise. So thank you to everyone. Inácio, please, can you summarize for me?
Bem, notas de agradecimentos. Gostava então de agradecer a todos os participantes, em especial aqui reconhecer a presença da Sua Excelência, a doutora Filomena Delgado, embaixadora de Angola na República da África do Sul. Também agradecer a presença e reconhecer aqui a presença de Sua Excelência o Dr. Carvalho Neto, Cônsul-Geral de Angola em Cape Town, bem como a todos os falantes ou os nossos palestrantes que aqui tiveram brilhantes apresentações com informações muito pertinentes, e também a todos aqueles que participaram e puderam então marcar aqui presença. Muito obrigado. Esperamos que estas informações que aqui foram partilhadas verdadeiramente ajudem-nos e que queremos aqui abraçar esta iniciativa em que a missão consular, bem como as duas agências, o Wesgro e a IPEX, que estão aqui a cimentar, para que verdadeiramente possamos unir esforços e fazer com que o que aqui foi dito possa acontecer. Portanto, amanhã vamos dar continuidade ao nosso seminário e este webinar amanhã terá início às 10 horas, horários da África do Sul, e 9 horas, não é, o período ou horário de Angola. Portanto, a todos o nosso muito obrigado. Aqueles que tenham questões, possam assim colocar aqui no chat e que a senhora Tatiana terá a oportunidade de assim respondê-las via e-mails, em que as apresentações também serão partilhadas a todos aqueles interessados. Portanto, o nosso muito obrigado.
Thank you.
You're welcome.